for the next topic, which is quite a curious one, really. At the 2026 World Economic Forum, the Microsoft CEO, Satya Nadella, has actually asked a rhetorical question: should we choose to use AI more? And I'm really baffled by this question, because he's basically saying we're all, spending all this money. We're all worried about the impact on the planet of these servers that you're needed to burn through these algorithms. So basically, society is investing more in the future, but it will remain a tool only used by the big tech and wealthy nations, and risks becoming a speculative bubble. Emily, he urged a move away from AI slop, low-value AI-generated content, towards what he calls cognitive amplifiers that actually solve complex problems. I did want to just... Yeah. I've been asked to correct something on the Grok algorithm that was used to enable people to generate nudify images, and there's been a huge debate about that, abusive images, including CSAM, that these images are not just being generated privately in people's houses in their own domain, but Twitter has enabled a way that in comments you can put a Grok trigger in there, and it can be generated on other people's feeds in their comments. So you can actually, you could go on to presumably someone like Taylor Swift's feed, put a comment in that actually contains a Grok trigger, and that will sort of nudify the person remotely. So it's an important distinction, because actually it's then sort of happening by robot at a distance from the people who would be held accountable for those images.
Yeah, that's an important correction. Thanks a lot. And back to the question about sort of
AI slop
versus, help using AI, harnessing the power of AI to solve really difficult, important questions. We know we're not really going to be able to make progress on climate change, on exploring deep space, on major medical type of discoveries like, protein folding or things like that help to solve dementia and horrible diseases like Parkinson's. AI is going to be an important part of solving those. And yes, it's back to the internet is this incredible thing that if you took somebody from the deep past and put them there now, you say, look at this box, which is a phone, you have access to all the world's literature, all the world's information, and what are we actually doing with it is watching rubbish videos or doom scrolling and using it. And in fact, two things came to mind this week that sort of illustrate that. Andrew Campling, good friend of this podcast and a great colleague, posted on LinkedIn, it's like, stop putting AI generated rubbish comments on. It's just ruining the environment in LinkedIn. And also the team ourselves, we were looking at some forms and people are already developing the ability to spot AI generated writing. Because it always has the same look, doesn't it? It's very confident, it's really well structured, but there's a paragraph at the top, there's 3 bullet points with some bold and everything, and you see it and you're like, oh, so there's the sort of the tool that is incredibly transformative that we need to do difficult stuff. And of course we're human, so what do we do with it? We
make cats do silly things.
There's two aspects to this, I think, and it's not, there's one way you could look at this and say, hold on, you guys are building this stuff and you're telling us that we need to become better dependent upon it the right way, not the wrong way, which will become obsolete very quickly. First of all, just thinking about this as what they call a community first infrastructure, it is a colossal investment that Microsoft and OpenAI, they're building Stargate, a massive $100 billion data center, a series of data centers, and promising them to be community first. They're paying their way. They won't raise local electric bills. They're water positive. They will replenish more water than they consume for cooling. And local economics, they won't skip property tax breaks, which the government were talking about. You build data centers here and we'll give you a tax break. Yeah. They're going to skip that and put that into schools and hospitals. So there clearly seems to be a pressure to make this more acceptable to the local communities. But they're basically saying we know that this is not going to work, and their strategy in this discussion seems to be a complete inversion of workflows. So what they're saying is, don't just glue a bit of AI onto old ways of doing things. Yeah. Actually rethink the way you're doing this. So Nadella argued for a complete inversion instead of fitting into these old jobs. You've been putting AI in and looking at cluster analysis and graphics and stuff into the world of scam and fraud intelligence. Is that you doing an old job and bunging a bit of an AI into it, or is it enabling something you would never have been able to do before?
It's enabling something that would otherwise take an extremely long time, and I think Emily hinted on this, that, there are things that AI can just do better. It can do things a lot quicker and a lot simpler and provide you with the results that you need to solve complex questions that people have. Thinking about the way that question was posed, should we use AI more? Should we use AI less? Because it seems like our first instinct when we're questioning anything is to shove it into AI. If we want to, comment on something, if we want to generate an image, it's all AI. And, should we be thinking about that before we just go ahead and just ask these prompts? And that's me looking at it from an environmental point of view, where we're looking at energy consumption and the amount that's used to generate these images of things that are probably, not life-saving. Should we spend our energy and our resources on things that are going to make a difference?
Emily, I was interested in his focus on large organisations. We're a small organisation that really depends upon AI. And for me, it's still a huge cost. There are these social benefits targeting the communities around data centres, but still access to AI for the small players is still prohibitively expensive. Carvey, Ranjbar, the CEO and co-founder of Whisper Security, was just saying, if there's one thing we could do to help with systemic scams and fraud, understanding what's happening better, it would be more processing power. We totally celebrate that, and we just don't have that. That's still huge costs. But he's not really talking about the small organizations. He is focusing his guns on large organizations and saying, unless your rate of change keeps up with what is possible, you're going to get schooled by someone small.
Ooh. Yeah, I mean, any disruptive technology provides an opportunity for new players to come in. I mean, we've seen OpenAI. We would never be talking about OpenAI 5-6 years ago. Now they're almost at the status of a big tech company themselves. They have come through and actually caught a lot of the big tech by surprise and stimulated a lot of, I think, healthy competition. But to Nathan's point of view, one of the big arguments against blockchain technologies is that they're incredibly resource intensive. Yeah. They are really damaging from the environmental point of view. And we know that about AI, but AI in a way is having the impact that we thought blockchain might be having, is that it's hugely resource intensive. Like, people are being advised not to say thank you to their chatbot, because just the sort of, well, you're very welcome and may I compliment you on your wisdom and all of your great other attributes. Just having that little polite exchanges is really expensive computationally. I do want to revisit, maybe when we have Alice and James, some of the research that we're doing, which exactly illustrates your point, Nathan. We would never be attempting it with people. We just wouldn't be able to. And actually doing the human review as part of our own quality control is hugely difficult and very, very expensive from a human resource point of view. So AI for research is fantastic. I think that obviously has to be a human in the loop, but there are things that you can attempt through AI that you would never dream of doing otherwise.
Personally, I agree with the CEO's warning, the Microsoft CEO's warning that, don't get left behind. In my experience, Emily, you called yourself a recovering lawyer. I think the legal profession, love them, know quite a lot of them, but still very, very held back in technology. My observation is there's a culture that sort of engineering is a bit funny and sort of not very, very intelligent, and databases are slow to adopt. And what you're seeing with AI is a lot of legal conveyancing type work. A lot of that intellectual work is being replaced by those smaller organisations who aren't thinking disruptively about their own organisations.
I think it's a really uncomfortable moment for the professions. And when I think back to my training time as a junior lawyer back in the 90s, one of the things that big law firms could really do, which small law firms couldn't, was they had huge precedence libraries, meaning they had lots of template documents that the fee earners themselves had drafted and made available to everybody. That meant if you wanted to draft a lease as a know-nothing trainee like me, you could find a really good draft which had been done by the firm. Now that is available to everybody. So lawyers and other professionals have to think, where are we actually adding value? Because any of us could draft a decent enough agreement, but we might not understand what it means. We might it's a bit like the, W.H. Smith wills. Why not just buy one? Well, most people get themselves into a complete mess when they don't also have the knowledge and legal training that goes with it, so you understand what the pitfalls are. But I'm afraid it's going to mean that fees are going to have to be less.